Hello, everyone. I'm Shamata. I am here on behalf of the South Asia Network for Communication, Displacement and Migration, that is the SAN-CDM. The SAN-CDM is a network of primarily media persons, but also community members, researchers, activists, etc., interested in migration in and from and to South Asia. We are an interdisciplinary network which has been set up by the Calcutta Research Group in early 2022, following a set of consultations with stakeholders in all the 8 different countries of South Asia, after which we drew up an action plan, one of which was to have people talk to each other, to create a platform where people across borders can share their comments and concerns and also share information and their expertise when they're dealing with migration in the South Asian context. So this is since mid 2022, the network has been functional. Many of the people that we know are speaking today have participated in various events of the network, and some, like Nirasha, who could not participate in an earlier event, has joined us today. So the point of the network is to also ensure that there is some sort of a conversation going on across the borders, which also takes into account the specificity and the difficulties of the South Asian mode of migration and refugee situations. This is our final event of the year. Earlier, we have talked about conflict-induced migration in South Asia and the challenges of reporting it. We have talked about we've tried taking stock of the refugee and migrant situations. We have also talked about the difficulties of reporting on climate-induced migration. So this is part of a range of activities that we've been carrying out over the last 2 years. And you can find out more about what we have been doing on the MCRG website. Just look for SAN-CDM on the MCRG website. With this, I'm very happy to hand over today's proceedings to our moderator, Dr. Bharat Bhushan. Bharat is, of course, a member of CRG, but also runs a really exciting collaborative venture called the 360 Info, in which Bharat does exactly what the SAN-CDM proposes to do, to get journalists and researchers in conversation with each other and to make difficult academic writing accessible and available for people across the world. So over to you, Bharat.
Thank you, Samantha. So welcome to this last webinar of the year, Reporting at Risk, Conflict, Disasters and Journalism Today. This webinar is about journalists and editors talking about the risks to reporting and to themselves when they are sent to cover conflicts. Conflicts are both a magnet for journalists, but they're also hostile environments for journalists. They pose risks, including that of death, injury, harassment, and imprisonment. Now, these conflicts could be ethnic conflicts, religious conflicts, or even wars between nations. Covering conflicts can present serious dilemmas for journalists. These can be both professional and moral, especially if the journalist belongs to a particular ethnicity in the conflict, a particular religion in the conflict, or a particular nationality in that conflict. In that sense, this discussion, I hope, will explore journalists' self-reflection on their roles in covering conflicts, as well as the forces they believe which impact their reportage, their journalism, when they are in the midst of a conflict and telling the world what the conflict is all about or what its impact is. Hopefully, our distinguished panelists today will also reflect on how journalists and editors renegotiate and reproduce the meaning and role of journalism in society during conflicts, and move between professional, ethnic, religious, and national identities depending on the nature of the conflict. Now, I don't want to say too much. We have a lot of distinguished experts before us. Today, we'll have amongst the panelists, Patricia Mukhim, who's the editor of Shillong Times. She's been a gender activist and has authored a book, Waiting for an Equal World, which looks at gender relations in India's Northeast. Patricia demystifies the myth that women enjoy a charmed life in matrilineal Meghalaya, a much romanticized notion. Amongst the many awards she has been confirmed conferred the Chameli Devi Jain Award for Outstanding Woman Media Person in 1996 and the Padmashree in 2000. I will introduce other panelists as and when I invite them to speak and as and when they join. But now, Patricia, the floor is yours. Please speak for about 6 to 7 minutes because we have 6 speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharat. Thank you for this opportunity to share experiences because just today we received a letter from a militant outfit of Meghalaya, which is ironically, speaking peace, talking peace with the government of Meghalaya. But today they sent us a letter and they want us to publish that letter. And the letter says that the government is proposing to close down a cement company. It was a PSU, it was badly run, and government has been pumping money. Not much has happened. So the government now has no alternative but to close it down. Now, this militant outfit today said that they literally threatened the local MLA and said he will have to be held accountable for the closure of this company. And then they went on to say that all the workers in the company who are below 45 years of age are welcome to join us if they believe in our cause, and we will pay them a salary of 25,000 rupees a month. So now the dilemma is, should we as a newspaper publish threats and intimidation from a militant outfit? Especially when that outfit is ostensibly talking peace with the government. If we do not publish, then we will be under threat for not publishing that. And most militant outfits in the region want us to publish their releases verbatim, which often is not possible because their releases run into several pages. So we are constantly dealing with these issues, and you're actually drawing a line or drawing a kind of a circle within which you can operate. You're talking about free press and all that in this region is, I think it doesn't help very much unless we really are trained to report conflict in a way that we do no harm to others and we do no harm to ourselves. But that is also, it's a difficult situation. So the threat to journalists in regions of conflict like ours in the Northeast, they come from both the state and non-state actors. If we publish this letter written by the militant outfit, tomorrow the police will come calling and say, why did you publish this? If we do not publish it, the militant outfits will, put the gun on us, on our heads. So what do we do in such a situation? And who will come to our help? Who will come to our rescue? So while it is, if we look back at the conflict in Manipur, while it is advantageous to be a local because you understand the political and the social nuances of the place, and you know exactly what to report, but you're also much more vulnerable because you're from the place. And if you take a position that is not welcome to one or the other side in the conflict, then again you are you're exposed to danger. Now it's easy to say that journalists should rise above their ethnicities, above their religions, above their community, but it is very difficult in the real sense because you're constantly exposing yourself. If you report correctly, we did that in 2018 when there was this clash between certain, the Mazhabi Sikh community that have lived in Shillong and that have served the community for several decades. Suddenly, they were told that they would be uprooted from the place where they were staying and they would be located in another place. Now, we reported the situation that arose where there was a conflict between the local people and the Mazhabi Sikhs. We reported the story as we saw it, but because we didn't report it from the prism of the local ethnic group, our newspaper was burnt and we were under threat of being closed down, and we face this all the time. So I would really like to for somebody to tell us, how do we report such conflicts? And, it's also true that we have no training on conflict reportage. I've said this again and again. Nobody really cares about giving us any kind of training. Forget about conflict reportage. Every time, I have to literally tell my reporters to emotionally detach themselves from the issue, because sometimes a reporter comes, he's from a particular community, he reports from the perspective of that community, and he doesn't see what the other community does. Then you have to tell him or her that, look, as a journalist, you have to transcend these loyalties. But it's a difficult proposition, because they tell us, when we see our own people being attacked, how can we be unbiased? How can we be non-partisan? And those of us who try and transcend these ethnic boundaries, we are not only under threat, we also get petrol bombs, but sometimes reporting from the ground zero and telling the whole world details about the victims could also put them in danger of further attacks. So this is also something we need to learn, which is report in a way that we do no harm. And every conflict is very, very complex. It's difficult for someone who is parachuted into a region to understand the complexities of the conflict and to try and report it as, what should I say, in a balanced manner as possible. And to tell you very frankly, if we adopt a do no harm protocol, then you'll have editors saying that this story is not going to attract eyeballs. You better find something more juicy. And that's how we saw the national media, telling their stories from Manipur or from any other state that is in conflict. In fact, in Manipur, most of the journalists landed only in Imphal Valley and reported from there, and did not really see what was happening in the hills, because the hills are difficult to traverse. So this is all I have to say. I mean, it's a conundrum that I don't seem to have any answers for, and I would really love to hear what the others have to say on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patricia. So thank you for bringing out the threats that local journalists feel while reporting on conflicts, and how difficult it is to negotiate between your professional identity and ethnic identity in these situations. And you pointed out how it's difficult to rise above your ethnicity, and if you do, you invite trouble. And you gave the example of Manipur and of Mazhabi Sikhs, etc. And you underlined the principle of do no harm, but also how that often conflicts with the market for readership and eyeballs. You also mentioned parachute journalism, which is a term which I find extremely questionable, because it assumes that locals have all the knowledge, and those who visit from outside do no homework at all, and that they are sort of come with blank minds, and you can write whatever you want on that blank page. I don't think that is always the case, but we'll leave it at that. And I hope you'll stay for the discussion. I'm sure there will be questions. And now, he's been out of Sri Lanka since 2006. Bashana is part of the Exiled Journalists Association, Journalists for Democracy in Sri Lanka, and has been previously hosted by PEN Germany. In the South Asia consultations held in 2022, Bashana was one of the 2 keynote speakers and was instrumental in flagging human rights concerns connected to reporting. The floor is yours, Bashana.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm extremely sorry because I got held up while I was traveling. I got held up in a train, so I was a little bit late. Sincere apologies for that. So, I mean, as already it was mentioned in the introduction, so I'm part of this exiled journalist group who were forced to leave Sri Lanka during the last 10-15 years. And the group is known as Journalists for Democracy in Sri Lanka, or better known as JDS. And we were formed in 2009, July, immediately after the official end of the war was announced. And it's a multi-ethnic kind of group. And I belong to the majority Sinhala community, but many of the members are also from the Tamil community. So one of the things that actually forced us to leave the country, even though the situation for journalists in Sri Lanka has never been, at least it has never been a kind of safe area to get involved in. Despite the fact many of the journalists managed to put up with the things that was the situation and to continue the work that they love to do actually. But what really happened after 2006 was actually 2004, since the grand coalition, which is known as United People's Freedom Alliance, UPFA, was, when the UPFA came to power, there was a new way of dealing with the dissenting voices in the media. And it started with attacking, as always, it started with the non-majority from the Tamil or the Muslim community, and it started with the Tamils actually. And it started by killing one of prominent journalists in the eastern part of the country, a Tamil journalist called Mr. Nadesan, and he was gunned down in May 2004. And that triggered a wave of killings against targeting journalists, mainly the Tamils actually. And the ethnic breakdown is quite important when you look at the composition of the victims, the ethnic composition of the victims, because Sri Lanka's, we, as far as we have documented since 2004 May, the killing of Ayature Nadesan, the Tamil journalist in the East I just mentioned, from his death up till the abduction of a Sinhala cartoonist who is known as Prageet Eknaligoda in January 2010, 44 media workers have been either killed or made to disappear, and after being abducted by the military or paramilitary groups. And out of this 44, 39 are actually from the Tamil community. And which shows it basically brings out the fact the ethnic identity is quite connected to being victimized by the state violence. And as a result of it, within this actually from after 2004, quite a lot of journalists that we used to work together from the Tamil community as well as from the Sinhala community. It's a very small amount of Sinhala journalists who are also targeted. And even the Sinhala journalists, if you look at the number of Sinhala journalists who were targeted, they were targeted mainly because of their position towards the Tamil issue. So which always connected to the ethnic aspect of the politics. So if there had been any killings, abductions carried out by, just like the case of Prageet Eknaligoda, who was abducted in January 2010, he was abducted mainly because of his position towards the war and the government's military when the government started pursuing a military option to the ethnic conflict. Prageet is one of the people who actually drew cartoons against that, and also he used to write articles against that, and that was connected to his abduction and disappearance. So it's always something, even if you are coming from the majority community, the decision whether you're going to be victimized or not will be determined by your position towards the ethnic issue and what position you are going to take on the matters concerning Tamils or matters concerning Muslims. So it has been a kind of constantly maintained policy, regardless of the fact which party is in the government. Because this is quite an important thing, because Sri Lanka is known as the oldest democracy in Asia, because I think Sri Lanka was the first British colony that got adult franchise, because it was like testing ground. We were the first Black people in the British Empire to practice voting right, even though there was no demand or a movement demanding that at that time. And since that period, actually, during the past 70 or 75 years, now we have just completed 75th year, just like India. And during these 75 years, the biggest perpetrator in Sri Lanka is actually the criminal perpetrator of Sri Lanka's politics has always been the state. And when we say the perpetrator, we are talking about numbers like 20,000, 50,000, 60,000, 100,000 people getting killed during a small period of time. Like in 1971, when the Sinhala, the majority community, took up arms against the government, it was crushed by killing more than 20,000 young people. And then in the late 80s, then there was a second Sinhala youth uprising in the south. it was crushed by killing more than 60,000 in a matter of 2 years. And then throughout the last 30 years, I mean, starting from 1979, the Tamils have been targeted by the state counter-insurgency campaigns, which has, I mean, which nobody knows actually, nobody has basically kept the count. So in that way, journalists can operate in Sri Lanka as long as they don't touch the topic of state criminality. We can talk about corruption, we can talk about nepotism, and we can talk about all kinds of things. But as long as you don't touch the state criminality and the criminal acts carried out by the state armed forces, you are safe. You are quite safe. You will be intimidated, of course, for depending on who you are targeting. You will be intimidated. But it's the biggest problem is not even that the state is deciding to get rid of someone, but what happens afterwards, whether there's going to be a continuous campaign demanding justice for that victim. And if your plight, I mean, if your fate has been decided because of your position about the state criminality, then you can be assured that no one would take up the case after you have been basically liquidated. You know, that's how it works. So the thing is, even if you are becoming a victim, if you know that there will be a constant campaign and you are, you know, whoever that is going to replace you will get some kind of justice, and there will be some assurance that the state will not repeat that action, that assurance will not come as long as you have dealt with, if you have dealt with basically with the state criminality. And that was the case, I mean, even with the JDS, Journalists for Democracy in Sri Lanka, which I am part of. The sin was actually, despite coming from the majority community, we were instrumental in bringing out the first war crime evidence in 2009, showing Sri Lankan armed forces executing blindfolded young men, naked young men, and which was picked up by the Western media and quite a lot of mainstream media. And since that moment, we have been bringing out more and more evidence. And because we are connected to the Sinhala society, the evidence comes from the Sinhala society. So because it is basically trophy videos collected by the military soldiers, and we basically get from the kind of people who are connected to military, and bringing out this is the kind of sin that would not be tolerated at all. And so as long as, I mean, in Sri Lanka's situation, I mean, as long as you don't talk about, as I said, the state criminality and the crimes that were committed by the state, there's a certain kind of space, breathing space that you can continue your profession. But if you if you keep one step beyond that limit and cross the line, then your days are numbered. That's how it is working. And so because of that, even though the war in Sri Lanka, the war against the Tamil people ended in 2009, all these 15 years inside the country, there had been no exclusive kind of, reporting on what really happened during the war. Now there's reporting about the mothers, who are protesting, the mothers of the disappeared. There's all kind of, reporting on those matters, the continuing protest, the political prisoners campaign, but not what happened during the war. You are not allowed to talk about that. And if you talk, you have to face the consequences. So in that sense, I think risks involved in countries like Sri Lanka is basically, from my experience, I know it's always something to do with the criminality of the state. And it's not about, I'm not saying the fact that, there have been armed organizations targeting dissenting voices, but when you look at the proportions, the state is the biggest kind of, state holds the biggest culpability. State is the biggest criminal who have been always acted with impunity, regardless of which government is in, which party is in power. So emphasizing that, I would like to, let you ask questions if there are any questions at the end of the session. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Bashana. Questions will be at the end of all the presentations. I thought the most important points you made were, one, that the state is the biggest criminal as far as reporters and reportage is concerned in Sri Lanka. But I thought an equally important point was that once persecution of journalists and control of journalism becomes normalized, which party comes to power becomes immaterial. So in a sense, media controls continue in the post-conflict era as well. Now, maybe later on, you'd like to reflect on this and say, why is that so? Is it because conflicts condition journalists in such a way that they anticipate government pressure, they anticipate control, and therefore they indulge in self-censorship. So what kind of conditioning takes place during the conflict, which impacts journalists themselves to moderate, or let's say to tone down their reportage? But we'll come to that later. Thank you very much for your presentation. And now I invite Gulalai Najib, who's the editor of the Afghan Times. She's joining us from Kabul. The Afghan Times is an online portal run by a team of Afghan women journalists who cover news from in and outside Afghanistan. Their special focuses on Afghan women's stories and on education. It's a multilingual portal. Gulalai was a student of literature before her education was interrupted due to political changes in her country, and she's now continuing training as a midwife while writing stories about the resilience of Afghan women. Gulalai, the floor is yours.
Hello and best wishes. I hope you all will be fine and doing well. And first I want to introduce myself. I'm Gulalai Najib, and I live in Kabul, Afghanistan. I work as a journalist for the Afghan Times, and I'm grateful to have you, and thank you for granting me a membership of Afghan women journalists. I would like to talk to you about the current situation and provide some information about the challenges they face in their work. With the arrival of the new government, the lives of girls have changed, and they are now forced to stay at home due to the Taliban orders. Women are not allowed to stay, work, to leave homes without permission, and if they are sick, they must to accompanied by their brother, father, or husband. They should have one of a man relative, and they can go outside from the home. I'm one of the girls who have been affected by this situation. I have lost my hope and desire to study, and I'm unable to have job. So this situation has put me in difficult situation, and many other Afghan women are also facing same challenges. However, I have managed to work secretly and in my profession. The Afghan Times has given me the opportunity to work in their media for about 2 years, where I focus on women's issues. I prepare report for the section. When I try to interview women for the reports, so they are hesitant to share their problems due to fear of the government. However, I try my best to talk to them and prepare good reports about them, and I'm grateful to still I'm able to work to continue my work and my profession. And despite numerous challenges, our media has been unable to provide job opportunities for women journalists. Women's voice are not being heard in Afghanistan, and their problems are not being addressed. Additionally, our media lack financial support. While we currently broadcast news and Pashto in English, we are unable to separate indirect languages due to economic and constraints and journalism in this section demanding a higher salary. And many women work in difficult situation as the Taliban restricts women rights. However, we continue to work in secret, facing countless risks. And many women do not want to have a daughter in Afghanistan because they are unable to provide a good life for them and protect them from forced marriages. Parents are forced to provide first needed life opportunity for their children, and we have many difficulty in journalism part because we aren't allowed to do our job, and there is lots of difficulties. So that was my speech from Afghanistan and the voice of Afghan women. Thank you for your valuable time, and thank you that you participating me in such a great meeting. If you have any question about Afghan women and Afghan journalism in Afghanistan, please let me know.
Thank you, Gulalai, and thank you for being brave enough to make this presentation. Your presentation is not only about the state of affairs of in Afghanistan and the condition of women in Afghanistan, but it's a prime example of how conflicts can impact journalism, journalists, and especially women journalists. When you say women's voices are not being heard, it's also because it's very difficult for women journalists like yourself to work there. You've also dealt with economic constraints on the media. And it's really sad to hear that people don't want to have a girl child any longer. They don't want daughters because of what the future holds for them. It's a very moving presentation. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions for you at the end of this discussion. And now I invite Swati Bhattacharjee, who works at Anandabazar Patrika. She's been a Fulbright Fellow, a Jefferson Fellow, and the recipient of the Ladli Media Award. The broad theme of Swati's work is poverty reduction, with special emphasis on policy geared towards gender justice. She has authored several books and is now also an accomplished author of children's stories. Swati is the General Secretary of the Indian chapter of South Asian Women in Media. Swati, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I would like to add to what has already been said, which is we have got a lot of insight into very different and difficult situations. I would like to add to that how the government, the state, also evokes certain kinds of borders in situations. Now, there are geographical borders, of course, we know, but in society itself, there are a lot of borders, be it gender or ethnic. And we find that when we as a journalist, a problem which was highlighted by Patricia right in the beginning, when we try to report on a conflict situation, it may not even be it can even be a conflict between an ordinary crime and a non-crime situation, and an ordinary situation. And even in this place, when a journalist is trying to do a very textbook kind of reporting, so quoting people from both sides and quoting the authorities. Even in such a situation where, as Bashana was saying, where the faults of the state, where the lawlessness of the administration is coming to the fore, it is now becoming a strategy of the state to evoke certain kinds of differences, certain boundaries, to make the journalist appear biased or even criminal. So we have had a case in our state recently where a journalist who was writing, it's a very simple, our bread and butter kind of a story, where there were unlawful toddy, liquor, that was being sold right in the middle of a residential area. Now, the people who were selling it were tribals. The people who were residing in the area were mostly general caste, and the women especially were protesting. The general caste women were protesting because it's such a, things were getting unruly, out of hand, and they were suffering for that. But because the journalist had written that there have been several complaints and no action was taken, this journalist was slapped with a case of atrocities against the scheduled tribe, scheduled caste, which is a very, very strong non-bailable offense. So apart from the harassment which the journalist had to go through, which was jail for a term, but apart from, he is now out on bail. But the point is that what a situation that was basically one of some tension between a criminal act going on in a residential area, it suddenly become a situation between a general caste and a tribal population. And here again, and this is something that the way the laws are being used by the state as weapons against journalists who have nothing but the facts to talk defend them. And when those facts are being it is being insisted that those facts are misleading or fake or intentionally being put out there to harm people. This is where all the problem is starting. I mean, it is getting really difficult. I would like to mention the Editors Guild's experience in Manipur when they visited and they wrote. And, many of us think that they were not wrong in saying that a lot of the media in Manipur had a Meitei bias, and because of the internet ban and because the value media was predominantly dominated by Meitei sentiments, the Adivasi, the hill tribes were not being properly represented. So the intention of Editors Guild, I think, which they, as they have stated, is to make the media introspect on the fairness of media representation. But what happened was that the police immediately filed cases, filed FIRs against them, and the Chief Minister of Manipur said that they were anti-national, that Editors Guild is anti-national. And this is a thing which is happening again and again. Laws are being slapped. And I wish to add that in India this year, we have seen the laws tightening, getting much more, I would say, diabolical, in that the telecom bill has been passed, and the new IT rules have again come out, and we have a proposed broadcasting bill. I won't go into the details of them, but the upshot in all these bills, the experts who have been talking to us on these, they're all saying that the whole distinction between what is fake and what is real, what is a true representation, even of the central government, is something that will be, that the law now says will be decided by bodies. It can be a fact-checking unit, as in the IT rule, or it can be a content evaluation committee, which is being proposed by the broadcast bill. So basically what the editor has always done in a newspaper, that now will be done by the government controlled bodies. And if from our experience in the last few years, we know that whatever is unpalatable to the government, whatever is seen as a threat, as a criticism, will be taken down, and the journalist, not only the journalist, but in the digital media, the service provider will also be targeted. So this is a situation where, I mean, this is something that was happening more informally, firstly through trolls, then through police cases and other kinds of threats. But now this is a using of terror law, this and that, of course, is there. Probir Purakayasto is still in jail while we speak, over 75 days now. The editor of NewsClick. But now we know that the legal apparatus to control the voice of the media, to basically edit out whatever is difficult, whatever is dissident, those voices, it's now getting easier. So this is something that we have to These boundaries of fact it's a new boundary that is coming up.
So thank you, Swati, for pointing out this very important fact that there's a new trend of using legal systems to curb free speech in conflict situations as well as in non-conflict situations. So for every report, if you have a FIR being filed against the reporter, journalism will become impossible. And it's not merely ordinary sort of simple laws, but also the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, terror laws, etc. The new bills which you mentioned, I think they require a separate discussion, and this is really not the place to discuss the new broadcast bill, although the consequences of that are huge for independent media. But thank you very much for pointing out all this. As I would have said a few things about the Editors Guild of India report, but since I was one of the persons who wrote the report, and I'm also under also in the legal process because of the FIR filed against all the members who wrote the report, I would not comment on it. But perhaps the laws that are being used to curb free speech and the new omnibus laws that are coming require a separate discussion, and hopefully we'll have that at some point. Now I invite Nirasha Piyawadini. She's a journalist, a rights advocate, and media trainer with 12 years experience in local international media. She's from Sri Lanka. Currently, she works as an independent researcher for UN Women Asia Pacific. In her previous role, she worked as a foreign correspondent for Global Press Journal and as a media program producer at the Center for Media and Information Literacy in Sri Lanka. Nirasha Piyawadini, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bharat, and thank you so much, CRG, DW Akademie, and yes, thank you, Samantha, for sharing my presentation. For now, I think we will not need to share. That's okay, keep it in the screen. Yeah. While my primary focus on the online harassment faced by women journalists and lack of institutional mechanism, it is essential to acknowledge that the threat in cyberspace is not exclusive for women journalists. So I want to acknowledge that furthermore, we can enrich this discussion by exploring how this challenge is pervasive for journalists in general, supplementing the conversation with the case studies of online harassment faced by male journalists as well. So through my insights, I would like to explain how online violence against women journalists make reporting risk, because our topic is reporting at risk, conflict, disaster, and journalism today. So an IFJ report mentioned that a survey conducted by the NGO #Generation in Sri Lanka, it's a reputed NGO in Sri Lanka, revealed that women's utilization of social media platforms such as Facebook is lower than that of men due to the prevalent fear of online harassment. Hence, I think we can go to this Google slide. Yes, I will continue my sharing my insights. So before I mention that #Generation released a report with IFJ. That report mentioned that women's utilization of social media platforms such as Facebook is lower than that of men due to the prevalent fear of online harassment. Hence, let's initiate a discussion focused on online harassment against women journalists and women activists. So, online harassment against women journalists and activists stands as one of the gravest contemporary threats to international press freedom. This malicious phenomenon not only fosters impunity for crimes against journalists such as physical assault and murder, but also serves the purpose of silencing, humiliating, and discrediting individuals. Beyond causing tangible psychological harm, It has a chilling effect, public interest journalism, determinately impacting women's careers and depriving society of crucial voices and perspectives. Especially independent journalists who bravely face threats of online violence and harassment. There needs to be a network and a centralized body journalists can turn to in times of need, but they often lack the support system required to do so. So at the moment, I would like to explain about a case study that I used for the UNESCO and for the global study report conducted by UNESCO and International Center for Journalists. So it would be great if we can go to slide number 2. Yes, slide number 2. Yeah, thank you. I'm presenting to you now some significant data from the global study on online violence against women journalists conducted by the International Center for Journalists and UNESCO. I worked as a research assistant for the Sri Lanka country report for this global study. According to this report, nearly half of the women journalists surveyed identified gender as the story theme most associated with online attacks, followed by the politics and elections and human rights and social policy. This pattern was also reflected in the interviews and the case studies. Okay, let's go to the slide number 3. The case study of Sri Lanka author and former journalist Shamila Said illustrates further the ways in which online violence is accompanied by offline threats. Said was targeted online when she suggested in an interview with BBC that the legislation of sex work could provide workers some protections. She was then subjected to a campaign of harassment by self-identified Islamic fundamentalists. Said has been raped and killed online, cyber-stalked, and had her identity stolen. In connection with the online attack, she was mocked offline, including while shopping. The English Academy that she and her sister ran was vandalized, and her parents have had to relocate it several times. So I don't hope to talk a lot about Shamila's case study incident. I would like to go to Natasha Adrisuria's incident that recently happened. Can we go to slide number 4 and 5? Yeah, slide number 5. Natasha Adrisuria, a Sri Lankan stand-up comedian. Actually, over the past 2 years, the Sri Lankan government has detained not only journalists, but also stand-up comedians and creative artists for making controversial statements against the government and humorous remarks about Buddhist folk stories in cyberspace. So it is evident that the government misused loopholes in the ICCPR Act and the Prevention of Terrorism Act for such actions. However, taking substantive legal action become exceedingly challenging for journalists and ordinary citizens facing severe online harassment. I too have been victim of online threats and cyberbullying in Sri Lanka. So Natasha Adrisuria, a Sri Lankan stand-up comedian, was arrested at Katunayake International Airport on May 28 on accusation that she defamed Buddhism through her performance in a comedy program. In April, Bruno Divakara, journalist and the head of the YouTube channel SL Vlogs, where the video presented by Natasha was broadcast, was arrested by the Criminal Investigation Department last 31st May. According to my knowledge. But the police soon released him on bail. There have been cases in the past where writers and journalists were arrested for content that posed a threat to religious and national harmony and national security under the provisions of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights Act, ICCPR Act. What specifically we noticed was there was big difference was seen between the comments on Bruno and Natasha on social media. Natasha was heavily insulted on social media based on her femininity.
I think this example is also very effective in showing how online violence has also become an offline threat. Natasha was released after 1 month on US dollars 320 bail in Colombo on July 5th following the intervention on High Court judge. However, can individuals be arrested under hate speech inciting violence for stating a hilarious and humorous jokes as a stand-up comedian? It is an inviolable right for people to enjoy freedom of expression in various ways. As a result, it ensures not only the right to a quality life, but also the right to a democratic society. I'm sorry, apologize if I took a long time from other speakers. So there are a lot more I have to share with you all, but I think I will take a long time for that. So I would like to highlight as a solution to address this issue comprehensively in the long term. It is imperative not only to focus on combating online harassment or ensuring punishment of perpetrators, but also to prioritize preventive education for women journalists, especially in rural areas and provincial correspondents, particularly in rural areas. Additionally, there is a need to delineate a precise roles of robust NGOs, social movements, other organizations, local institutions, offer protections to women journalists and journalists who face threats. So while these organizations often issue press releases to international bodies about victims, it is crucial to define the specific guidance or services they provide to protect the victims. The holistic approach aims to create a more resilient and supportive environment for journalists, especially women, in the face of online threats and harassments. Thank you.
Thank you, Nirasha. I think you took a very limited interpretation of the theme, which was reporting at risk, conflict, disasters, and journalism today. My suspicion is you decided to focus on journalism today and give us a rather brilliant presentation on online violence against women journalists and how to combat online harassment. Thank you very much. And now we move to our last participant, Aireen Jaman, who's the president of Forum for Freedom of Expression in Bangladesh. She's also the Secretary General PEN International Bangladesh, and also is teaching at the North-South University. Aireen.
Thank you very much. Respected moderator Bharat Bhushan, speakers, participants, host Shamota Bishas, good evening, greetings, and Happy New Year from Bangladesh. I am expressing some concern regarding our new Act, Cybersecurity Act 2023. Bangladesh National Assembly has changed the name of Digital Security Act 2018 to Cybersecurity Act 2023. In 2018, before the 11th national election, Digital Security Act has been passed in Bangladesh National Assembly. There has been a global outcry against the DSA. The US Department of State said in a briefing in Washington during April 2023 that the Digital Security Act is one of the most draconian laws for journalists. In the line of these events, government passed Cybersecurity Act 2023. You know, our 12th national election is knocking at the door. In the name of amendment, this is just old wine in a new bottle. I am expressing some sections. The 9 sections of the DSA identified as a threat to independent journalism and freedom of expression are sections 8, 21, 25, 28, 29, 31, 32, 43, and 53. The CSA contains all these sections through which the law criminalizes certain kinds of information and news publication and expression of certain thoughts and opinions in the same way that the DSA did. The definitions of crimes under this law are also as vague as ever. The only difference is that some offenses that are non-bailable under the DSA have been made bailable. Punishments have been reduced for some offenses, and provision of additional punishment for repeated offenses has been omitted. Out of the 9 sections that curb freedom of expression, 7 sections have been amended in terms of punishment and bail, while no changes have been made in 2 sections. For example, Section 8 of the DSA, which empowered the Director General of Digital Security Agency and law enforcement agencies to remove or block digital content through Bangladesh Telecommunication Regulatory Commission, has been retained in the CSA. Similarly, police authority to search and arrest without warrant under Section 43 of the DSA has been kept intact under Section 42 of the CSA. There is a 10-year jail sentence under Section 21 of DSA for propaganda against the spirit of the liberation war, father of the nation, national anthem, or national flag, which has been reduced to 7 years in the CSA. Punishment for hurting religious sentiments under Section 28 has been reduced from 5 years to 2 years, and the offense has become bailable. 5 years jail term for defamation under Section 29 of DSA has been replaced with a maximum fine, Taka 25 lakh. However, according to the law minister, if the accused fails to pay the fine, he or she will face a jail sentence of 3 to 6 months. Section 31 of CSA proposes a 5-year imprisonment instead of 7 years for destroying communal harmony. Under Section 32, the punishment for breaching official secrets has been reduced from 14 years to 7 years. While the CSA replaced the DSA, the proceedings and trials of all existing cases under the DSA will continue. Moreover, we, the frontline defenders, are very much concerned about 3 sections. Section 40, Police Inspector got lots of power. Section 41, police can search and seize any system and device with a warrant. Section 42, police can seize, search, and arrest without a warrant. If police inspector believes that anyone has done etc., 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 I strongly say that belief is a vague term in this regard. In this situation, how will it be assured that the experience of repealing Section 57 of the Information and Communication Technology ICT Act 2006 will not be repeated in the face of criticism the government repealed Section 57 in 2018, but all its provisions were included in 4 separate sections. Sections 25, 28, 29, and 31 of the DSA with reduced punishment. Punishment under Section 57 was 14 years maximum, which was reduced to 3 to 10 years under different sections of the DSA. At the time, Law Minister Anisul Haq had reassured us that Section 57 would not be retained in the DSA. Not only that, there are many laws in Bangladesh which is barrier for free and fair journalism in Bangladesh. I am telling a list just for your kind information. Number 1, the Penal Code 1860. Number 2, the Code of Criminal Procedure 1898. Number 3, the Official Secrets Act 1923. This act has been activated regarding Rosina Islam. Probably you have heard her name, etc. Cybersecurity Act 2023 will conflict with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Bangladesh Constitution. Time of pre-election, election, and post-election are very crucial for journalists to do reporting. They are targeted by various interest groups like government, political parties, terrorists, businessmen, fanatic, corporate personnel, etc. As we have a draconian cybersecurity act. Finally, I express from DSA to CSA the same bottles of agony for journalism. Thanks again. Now I am requesting Mainul Bhai, if I miss any point, please add that.
No, just hold on before Manuel comes in. He can come in discussion. So thank you very much, Irene, for discussing the Cybersecurity Act. But once again, I wish you had focused on how these laws are being used against journalists who are reporting on conflict situations in Bangladesh, because Bangladesh, to my mind, is a society in political turmoil, at least in the run-up to the elections. And if government, political parties, terrorists, businessmen, police, etc., are targeting journalists, I wish you had given us some examples of how these laws are being used to either temper reportage or target journalists. But never mind, I'm sure you'll do that in the course of discussions. And I think with this, we can open the discussion to everyone. People can ask questions. You can write them in the chat box. But my only request would be, please don't bring in extraneous things. I already see some comments about migrant workers from West Bengal not getting international attention, etc. That is not our focus. Our focus today is how do journalists negotiate their professional, ethnic, religious, national identities during a conflict.
Is for Gulalai. Firstly, I want to thank her for her work and for her participation today. What types and mechanisms of surveillance do you face when working as a woman journalist in Afghanistan? I have a second question, only if we have time. In your opinion, is it possible to create spaces for women or to mobilize women's voices using online digital tools, social media, etc., that can lead to any sustainable movement for women's rights in Afghanistan? So not exactly connected to conflict, but to women journalists. That is the only question we have so far. I think some people will raise their hands and ask the questions themselves. There is already Nasreen's hand up.
So is Gulalai there? Gulalai, are you there? Are you going to answer that question? Those two questions?
Yes, I'm here. She asked about that, which kind of difficulty women have. Am I right?
Yeah.
So
Women
women
journalists.
can't.
Sorry,
Women can't go out from home
So
for
women journalists.
making reports.
Women
Women
journalists.
journalists. Yes,
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah.
Women journalists can't go out from home because Taliban do not allow to women and women can't work as a journalist because they want to ban in every part of life on women. So when a woman want to make reports, they should work secretly, because maybe you will hear about some women that they was women journalist. So when they want to make report, they face with many challenges. Like one woman was a journalist, and she wanted to make a report. Taliban aware about her work, and they put her in jail. And unfortunately, we have lost two women journalists in this year. We don't know how they killed, but people telling that they are killed by Taliban. So we have many difficulty for security, for my personal security. I can't tell it because I should keep calm. So for that reason, I don't want to mention it.
Okay. Nasreen?
Yeah, thank you so much for your excellent, presentations and also making this conversation going. It's just more like a generic concern that it seems, or what I gathered was, it seems stories demand some kind of allegiance, and it appears also that in some sense, stories also, in some way doesn't have boundaries. So when we are implicating state, as Bashana was talking about very rightfully, and when you know that the state, in this case, Sri Lankan state he was talking about, has indeed committed, such certain kind of crimes, if I may put it very strongly. How does it really impact on the stories that emerge thereafter? I know there is threat, I know there is intimation and all of that, but that doesn't really stop the story from coming out. So I was just curious to get your perspective, and Patricia has unfortunately left. Also, I wanted to get a sense of that, this dilemma that she was talking about. How does one navigate? Thank you.
Patricia is still there.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm still here.
So
okay,
would you like to take that, and after that maybe Bashana?
Yeah, the story has to come out, and I guess we have to continue to to wriggle our way through as long as we can. What else do we do? See, we have taken this profession out of a passion, out of a commitment, and to back off, despite having to face several cases, including 2 in the Supreme Court at the moment. One has been resolved in March 2022. Sorry, March 2021. But there's still one more pending. But I really don't know how we live from day to day. We live on a very fragile hope, and we continue to do our best. We know we are under threat from not just 2 sides, but different sides, because we also have what we call pressure groups here. And there are a whole lot of them. And these pressure groups live by extortion. So when we report that, we are also facing threats from them. So there are a whole lot of actors that actually impinge on our work. But other than continuing to do what we do, there's no other alternative.
Bashana?
Well, I think, as far as Sri Lanka's situation is concerned, perhaps you might be surprised because there hadn't been any investigation at all, investigative reports, on the matters concerning for example, the recent war crimes. There had been no single story on any of the, Tamil media used to cover them, but Sinhala or English media, there hadn't been anything on media. The mainstream media has never ever covered anything on that related to the crimes committed by the state armed forces. And interestingly, when there was an armed uprising in the southern part of the country, the Sinhalese were involved in the late 80s, where 60,000 got killed, more than 60,000 actually. Then the mainstream media, the stories dominated. The stories about the crimes committed by the armed forces, the abductions, disappearances, torture, and all these things dominated the mainstream media because the victims they could identify with. We had a kind of, share the identity with the victims. But when it comes to the Tamils, for example, the victims, actually we identify ourselves with the perpetrator, not with the victim. So therefore there was a kind of conveniently overlook the important news or the kind of events that had taken place during the final stages of the war, because I think there's a kind of collective agreement among the majority community, which I am part of actually. The collective agreement is that actually what makes us a nation is to deny that such crimes has happened, that crime has ever happened. So that denial makes us a nation. Initially, in the 80s, it was the other side. Actually, it was actually the denial. The state denied the involvement, but the media had to identify themselves with the victims, who are the majority community, the majority population. And so therefore, this denial didn't work with the ordinary people. And if this memory, for example, if this memory has been properly maintained in Sri Lanka, the crimes that were committed by the state, the best example is, for example, the past president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, would not have ever been elected by popular vote because he was directly involved in the counter-insurgency campaign against the Sinhalese in the late 80s, where more than 1,000 people in a certain district, where he was the military coordinator, was actually abducted and killed. So that collective memory has completely gone. So in that sense, I think, none of the recent crimes, I don't expect that anybody will ever carry out an investigation on that matter and then write reports into mainstream media, which is highly unlikely, in my opinion.
But Nasreen, what did you mean by saying stories have no boundaries? I didn't understand that bit.
Well, before I come to that, Bharat, may I just, if nobody's asking question, I just want to continue this. But Bhashana, what you actually mentioned was very interesting. That 80s and the present, especially after the demise, and you're attributing very rightfully. But this silence, this so-called silence around the war crime itself, it is state generated. But the question is, why did the journalists or the media, decide to kind of continue that, which was not the case in the 80s. Even if LTT was, committing those crimes, and there were a lot of, unrest that was going on. So, maybe later you can probe, because I can see Ranavida has his hand up. I think, Bharat, what I really had in mind was, stories have no, boundaries, meaning any kind of stories, war crime, or any kind of, as you would know, because, but based as a researcher, I would say anything that we pick up, be it in a camp, be it any way, they don't really, it resonates across the border. So I was kind of picking up what Patricia was saying somewhere, that, when you have allegiances, in some sense, some stories travel faster than others. And why that is the case. It's about ethics, I know, but is there something more, something? So I was just trying to be a little more provocative to get some responses. But, I can see Ranavita's hand up. So I think, let's hear what Ranavita has to say. Yeah.
Can I, Bharat?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Unless Bashana wants to react to what the senior said.
I think I will wait for Ranbir to
Okay.
ask a question, and then I will get back to that. Yeah.
Okay. Ranbir.
I mean, I want to continue something that Nasreen mentioned, that stories have no boundaries. As I heard it, I mean, it rings something little different, in the sense that, let's say, in Gaza today, where the journalists are being killed in extraordinary number, etc., this becomes the part of the story. And some of the things are known precisely because the journalists have been the victims of that. So that is a part of the story. And in fact, there are many instances where the way stories are written, the way stories are reported at great cost, that is the only way in which the story is then produced. So I know it sounds a bit philosophical, but on the other hand, if you think of the conflict situations, and Gaza is the latest situation, but we can think of many other situations where what we consider as news wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have been a news until and unless those who produce the news, in the sense, I'm speaking of the journalists, but also newsmakers as common people, so they become the victims. So my, therefore, comment would be that perhaps we have to, somewhat revise this idea that there is a reality and the journalists are in a way outside it. The media is there, then reflecting on it, reacting on it, reporting on it, etc. But what I want to tell is that what would happen and how would we think if we take it as our starting point, that media is a part of the whole thing, not in the sense of bad or good, but simply in the sense of how stories are produced. So I think Nasreen's point has resonance, and it can be taken forward when we say that stories have no boundaries, in the sense that stories do produce or do demand their victims.
Well, for every good story, if a journalist has to die, we'll have no journalists left.
No, it's like all human rights defenders, that human rights defenders are not other. They are not forces outside the scene of abuse of human rights.
I understand that. So
okay.
So the question precisely is, how do you negotiate your various identities? You're being part of that reality and you're also being outside it. That is the negotiation that the journalist has to carry out if he's telling the story to people outside.
I don't want to be a spoilsport on this.
No, it's a good point you make.
No, but all I'm saying is that this search for that elusive difference, to me, it is elusive. Because only when the journalist becomes a part of it, not necessarily because the journalist will be there by partisan, maybe the journalist will become a partisan, maybe will not. But only when the journalist becomes a part of it, certain stories are produced. Certain stories are produced out of Gaza precisely because the journalists have become part of it, not in the sense that they have become warriors, but they are part of whatever is happening. And that is why at great cost, we are getting this story. Okay. That is all. I'm saying that it looks a bit philosophical, but on the other hand, if we look at it from the point of where the boundary actually ends, and if we accept it as a matter of life, that boundaries at times vanish, and only when boundaries vanish that you get whatever you call truth or reality or story, they come out. That is it's only in that sense that I thought that Nasreen's remark was very provocative, that stories actually do not have boundaries.
Any other questions?
We do have a question from Chalika Shashikani from Sri Lanka. Chalika says, greetings from Sri Lanka to Bashana and Nirasha. Thank you so much for the interesting presentations. My question goes to Bashana while agreeing with him regarding state criminalization. I'm curious to know what legal measures were taken by the journalists themselves during wartime, that is before 2009, to protect the Tamil journalists.
Can I add to that a question of mine? Because I covered Sri Lanka at that time. So my question to Bashana is, were not the Sinhala editors complicit with the state in what was happening to Tamil journalists? There were Monday morning meetings in the presidential house where virtually they were told to behave and keep to the straight and narrow. And they did most of the time.
Well, I think, put it bluntly, actually, there's absolute, the Sinhala editors, actually, they're absolutely complicit in every, not only the crimes that were committed against the journalists and media workers, but also the crimes against the Tamil minority as well, because of the narrative they upheld, the narrative they maintained willfully, that basically kept the information that were crucial information to understand the situation in the areas where the Tamils live. It kept the Sinhalese, the ordinary Sinhala readers who were reading this, who were basically interacting with this media, kept them in dark, and they had no way to know, apart from the kind of glorified kind of narrative that was repeatedly aired on television and also in the Sinhala media. So there's a clear element of complicity. And for the first question, actually, the question from Sri Lanka, I think there hadn't been many legal actions as far as I know, because I think, at that time, if you remember the time, there was actually very limited space where you could actually take any sort of legal action against the state. Because actually most of the time the perpetrator of the crimes were either state armed forces or the paramilitaries who are working alongside the state armed forces. All these, for example, the first journalist I mentioned who was killed in May 2004, Mr. Nadesan, Ayaturi Nadesan. Now, he was killed by a paramilitary gunman, and who was actually closely working in the Sri Lankan military. So nobody would think about taking a legal kind of challenging legally to any of these perpetrators, because they know quite well, what would be the repercussions. So what really happened from the journalist side was actually there had been a limited attempt to protest those crimes. There had been, like, for example, the groups such as Tamil Journalist Alliance. There was a Tamil Journalist Alliance, and there was a journalist organization called Sri Lanka Working Journalists Association, where Sinhala journalists were also involved. And they were actually campaigning, and also Free Media Movement. All these groups are campaigning against the killings, against the abductions and all sorts of crimes that were committed against the media workers. But then what really happened was most of these leading people of these groups were forced into exile. If they were lucky enough to survive, they were forced into exile. And that's how the Journalists for Democracy came into existence, because all these people were forced out of the country. They had to flee the country. And as a way of engaging with the Sri Lankan state, continue the engagement with the Sri Lankan state, they had to form a kind of organization. We were looking into the options that was left to us after leaving the country, and the exile organization became a reality because of that. Because we thought we were able to redesign, basically reconfigure the rules of engagement, redefine rules of engagement with the state, where we could challenge and take up the issues that we were not able to take up inside the country, also with the assurance that the state would have limited ability to reach us when we are doing it from outside. So that's how we got information from the country, like the video material, the photographic evidence, and all these things, because they were not able to break the news inside the country. So they had to smuggle it out of the country, and then we had to work on that and to make it a kind of news, basically to make it news outside the country. So that's how it happened, actually.
Any other questions? None? So thank you very much, panelists, for your presentation. I hope, I wish, in fact, all of you had kept to the brief. I'm afraid only a few of you did. But what was clear was, when reporting on a conflict, journalists do not just circulate information about the conflict. They define, they frame, and they deliberate and discuss the conflict in a particular way, which creates public opinion. In doing so, they experience both overt and covert pressures. They experience restraints on their reporting. They see how their autonomy in writing and reporting is limited. So they also pose a lot of difficulties for journalists. But equally, as Bashana's presentation showed, the cessation of violence or a transition to a more peaceful state does not do away with the challenges for journalists. A more peaceful state of affairs also presents serious challenges when a society is emerging out of conflict for journalists. The political pressures, the professional and ethical dilemmas experienced during the conflict continue to influence journalists and their writing. So when the violence and conflict ends, censorship or self-censorship does not immediately disappear. In fact, it continues, and it continues to impact reportage. Depending on how democratic or inclusive the transition from conflict to peace was, journalists could still be under pressure from the state, media owners, and other actors. If that were not so, people like Bashana Abeyawardane would not still be in exile. They would be back in Sri Lanka because, for all practical purposes, peace has returned to Sri Lanka formally. But with that, I would like to end this webinar. Thank you very much for your participation, for the questions, and for the discussion. Thank you. Samata?
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, everyone. I am just here to formally thank everyone, including Bharat, who has been the rock that we have all relied on. This was the end of our online events on behalf of both the Calcutta Research Group and the South Asia Network for Communication, Displacement and Migration. We thank you all for participating, as always. We hope to keep in touch, and please let us know of what you are up to, and we will try and circulate it in our respective networks as well. Have a very, very happy new year. We also should thank our partners, the DW Akademie, as well as the other organizations, the IWM and the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, which have helped us in our continuing work on migration and refugee studies, especially in the South Asian context. Have a very happy new year, and let's hope we have to have less such events and that there is much more peace everywhere. Thank you so much.